Welcome to my art form.
It's time for Post-Orthodoxy, a show about changing our minds.
Yeah, baby.
With your hosts, Dark and Ainsley Sevier.
Maybe what they believe about reality isn't all of reality.
What?
I know, right?
We're on a mission to have a better time with more people more often.
The question is more, how do you get there?
Post-Orthodoxy explores strongly held beliefs, how those belief systems divide or connect people, and what might be found beyond those reality bubbles.
Keep calm. Don't lose your head.
I've got a piece of chocolate here with me because I got anxiety about doing this.
Welcome to this neighborhood, neighbor.
All right, indeed. Welcome to this neighborhood, and thank you so much for joining us on Post-Orthodoxy, episode 24, a conversation with Andrea Cross Guns.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for joining us, Andrea.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you coming all the way down. Is it appropriate to say where you live, or would you rather I don't?
You can.
Thanks for coming all the way down from Helena today to spend time with us in the studio.
Absolutely, yeah.
You and Dark have known each other a lot longer than I've known you.
Yeah, I met Andrea in Honolulu. I don't know what year it was. 2001, 2,
I think.
2002. Was running an open
that
mic.
Relationship can't buy cigarettes anymore because they moved that up to 21. But you could join the military. Your relationship could join the military.
It's old enough to join the military.
Yeah.
It's that many years. Okay.
Yeah.
I have to keep reminding myself that 2000 was 21 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Wild.
1980 was 40 years ago.
Okay, stop.
Okay, so in Hawaii.
So I was hosting an open mic at a place called the Coffee Factory.
Yeah, the Coffee Factory.
And I had it was my least favorite open mic of all the ones that I ran because there was a karaoke bar next door. So every time there was a quiet, you could hear a Japanese businessman getting off work, carooning karaoke next door.
And didn't that come in like midway?
It did. We started doing the open mic, and then the karaoke started. And then our friend Brian Von Ossen wrote a song about my struggles with karaoke, and that I needed to be more sensitive to the culture of the islands.
Mm.
So
the karaoke is an island culture.
Well, it's definitely a part of the Japanese
Pacific
culture
Rim, Asian.
Yes, okay.
On the islands.
Yeah.
They actually have like specific just for like Korean or Japanese or like
they
karaoke houses that you go in and rent it. Have you seen those?
Yep.
I didn't know what they were, and I tried to go into one time. I was staying in a hotel, and I was bored, and I went up, and I was, a karaoke house, and they're like, no, you don't belong here. You don't know what's going on. You don't know these songs.
Oh, you had to have been able to sing in Japanese or Korean.
I guess so. Yeah. I
think it would be fun to have like a Japanese or Korean style karaoke house, but for U.S. songs, because that way you just get 6 of your best friends together and get drunk in your own room and sing the songs you want, and then the other people can go sing the songs they want in a different room. That's the thing, is like they have like several different rooms you can rent, each with its own karaoke machine and couches.
I feel like that really kind of takes away from the karaoke experience,
being forced to listen
the full range of experience in one karaoke room.
I need to hear somebody do "You've Lost That Love and Feeling Poorly," and come on.
Right.
It's not the same experience without.
Well, yeah, I suppose that's true. You gotta, at least in American culture and the way that we treat getting up on stage in front of people and bearing your soul, like in the U.S. mindset, you need to hear somebody else doing it badly in order to feel good about yourself getting up and doing it.
That's
That's something I've
if
noticed a lot.
you need some motivation.
Yeah, is like hearing somebody sing Shania Twain and totally not hit it.
I like the person who comes up and does like a talk version of the song.
You can do Mac the Knife is basically a talk version.
Right.
If you can't sing, you can always do Mac the Knife.
Right. Or there's a David Bowie song, I think, too, that I've heard people do a lot.
I have a fan theory that our favorite people haven't actually passed away, that they've gone to the moon or some sort of island colony, and maybe that they're not invisible or eternal. What's it called? Immortal. That perhaps they're immortal, like David Bowie, Robin Williams, Alan Rickman.
And they're doing karaoke.
Yeah, or whatever they want. They just were like, I'm done with this scene,
Yeah.
and it's time to move on.
The whole 27 Club.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the Billie Eilish is Marilyn Monroe, and she was like, you know what? I'm ready to go back. I've had a nice long break, and she just came back and like is doing like all this nice sultry, angsty music.
That fits. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that.
Checks
Totally.
out. Yeah.
Somebody on Facebook was disagreeing with me today, and they're like, "No, she's much more like some other person." They were. She was like, "No, you got to watch her documentary. She's much more like Kurt Cobain or Billie Holiday." I was like, I wasn't saying like physically. No, I was saying physically.
Physically,
not like genre
psychospiritually.
Yeah,
Anyway.
she could be more psychospiritually similar.
So are they insinuating that she's on heroin?
Yeah, because those two, they have that in common.
Those two and Marilyn Monroe?
I don't know that. But she was on meds. I don't know about
that. Yeah, she was on whatever Edward Bernays was doing to people in the public relations.
She was on public relations?
Yeah, they were like, no, they were like rehabilitating her. These descendants of Sigmund Freud and their scientist friends had Marilyn Monroe living with a family in their house to try
that was Anna Freud.
Anna Freud, Sigmund Freud's daughter, was like doing this experiment where she's like, people just really need to be shown a lovely family unit, and then they won't do bad things. And so they had, for a while, towards the end of her life, they had Marilyn Monroe living with this like producer and his wife and children to try to keep.
This is normal life. Come and have a normal dinner with normal people.
The nuclear family is completely normal.
Whose idea was it? Was it the dad's
Anna Freud.
idea? No.
Right?
Yeah, probably.
I was kind of like, wait a second.
It's all in her best interest.
Right. The nuclear family. Norm Goodwin is simulcasting us on Facebook and YouTube so that he can see his comments pop up on his TV in his living room.
Oh, nice. All the way in Florida.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, Norm.
Yeah.
Norm made that amazing octopus god and astronaut paint lithograph.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
Lino cut?
Right. Not lithograph.
I'm going to have to look more closely at it when I finish.
You like engrave linoleum and then spread ink all over it and then smush it. Linoleum cut.
Lino cut.
Anybody else that's tuning in, give us a hoot and a holler of where you're from. Say hi. We know we have a lot of lurkers and we appreciate you guys. It is also nice to know where we're broadcasting to. It's encouraging.
I'm just making a bunch of angry faces for other people.
Oh, I was going to invite people to watch this.
Oh.
I forgot.
It's okay.
Do you want me to share it to your timeline?
Yes, please.
They'll watch it after the fact.
Perfect. And then I'll tag some people later.
Andrea.
How do I share that?
So what exactly did they think was wrong with Marilyn Monroe?
Depression.
Her depression
okay.
and the partying. So, quote unquote partying, you know. So like her depression and, you know, her upbringing and then the partying that came from or produced, you know, the swing back and forth between those two things.
What's the part? I guess I don't know that much about her. She was a partier.
She was, well, whatever. She was a goddess.
Right.
Sometimes you got to do something to take the edge off of being a goddess.
You know, like, because normal life is husband, wife, and 2 kids forever in a house.
Right.
Well, and certainly her life was less of commonplace. So there's not a lot of us that live in the spotlight that way.
It's true. And it takes, I often wonder if like all of my favorite stars that seem really well adjusted have their own really awesome therapist. Because like I can't even handle the small town drama that has me like putting sunglasses on to go to the post office.
Who are the well adjusted ones?
I don't know, like Dwayne Johnson seems really, really chill and full of mana and like really loving and gives to his kids and gives to his mom and gives to other people's. He just seems grounded. And I'm like,
maybe he has really good drugs.
Yeah, possibly, you know, or like the Hemsworth brothers have always seemed really chill. I don't know a lot of female chill. Helen Mirren. Maybe she just gets by on being British and not giving a fuck what people think, you know?
We're not on the radio. You can say fuck.
Oh yeah, by the way.
I think that's a big part. Probably having the ability to not give a fuck.
Very British.
I'm with you on the like even in the small town, feeling super seen.
I do. I have to have polarized glasses.
Not a good feeling. Even if it's positive. If you feel like you're being seen everywhere you go.
Observed.
It's
noted.
Observed. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's it can be
observed without being actually seen.
Yes. and seen without being observed too. Oh. There are days where you definitely would like to just be able to do your stuff without having to say hi to the people that you run into, but then I feel like an asshole.
Or just like the pressure of maintaining this good impression that everybody has.
Yeah.
Right. You always have to be. I sometimes rejoice when I meet when I run into a new person in the store and they want to make casual like today I had a guy, an older gentleman, speaking of neurodiversity, just sort of following me around with his cart and making conversation through like 6 aisles at Walmart.
Yeah, today.
Yeah, and just chatting with me about the various things that I was looking at or looking for.
Were there things in his cart?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Just like
otherwise, I'm like that was definitely FBI, CIA.
We've been wondering about that, but I feel like if this guy was, then he was actually doing a way better job on his cover than our previous tales have done. But
Paradise Valley, Arizona, Gary's checking in, and Bill Kleeman.
Oh my gosh, and Tammy Strong, she's in like Tammy Missouri Strong. Or something.
Wow.
I don't know. It's just in the middle. It's one of those M1s in the middle.
Minnesota and Missouri are very different things. You'll offend somebody.
Oh, I'm so sorry. It's a state in the middle of the country.
We're in an M state.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I guess some people consider Montana Midwest.
I don't know why they do that.
Yeah, it's
I had somebody say St. Louis, the South.
Part, and I was the flat part could be considered Midwest.
Right. I mean, I think
Great Falls
we're like straddling the divide.
Yeah.
We're in both halves of the country. Right. That's how big we are.
Truly.
So this guy was following me around, and I find myself feeling really relieved that he doesn't know me. So he doesn't know that I'm normally really outgoing and compassionate and patient. So I was able to just be curt and focus on my business and not respond to everything he was saying and like not feel obligated to be the Ainsley that I usually am.
Right. To have your
he doesn't know.
Public persona preserved.
Weird, right?
That was some good alliteration. Public persona preserved.
Put it in a high school essay.
No, I had an experience of we're going to do a Post-Orthodoxy entire episode answering everybody's questions about my experience of being on Saved by the Bell, because
we'll just do it all at once and get it over with.
I've kept it in the closet for a long time, but it just keeps, it's like one of those, it just keeps coming up.
I've seen it.
And I
haven't yet.
I have all kinds of feelings about it, and there's a story I want to tell about it, but it's one of those things that when I did the episode, I ended up getting 3 stalkers off of one 30-minute episode of a kid's show. I had 3 stalkers track me down, and I couldn't go to a mall for about 4 years. Not that I wanted to, but sometimes you have to go to the Radio Shack, and that's the only place it is.
Radio Shack, does that place still exist?
Doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. I'm talking 1992.
I remember Radio Shack.
Yeah.
So my experience of I misunderstood how much people watch TV and then are branded by everything that happens, completely branded by everything that happens. The Saved by the Bell was one of those things where my first experience was actually Love Connection. I was on Love Connection, and I thought I used a different name, and I thought I'm just going to be this different guy, and I'll be on TV. I was projecting the way I watch TV on everybody else. So I thought I'll be on TV, I'll be on Love Connection. That'd give me some exposure, and that way when I'm doing stand-up comedy somewhere at Uncle Fucker's Chuckle Hut somewhere in Missouri or something, then people say, oh, I've seen this guy on TV. He must be a comedian that I've seen on TV. But no, when I was at Uncle Fucker's Chuckle Hut, people 2 years later were like, you went on that date with that girl and that thing happened with the car and she was only eating a salad. But they started telling the whole thing 2 years later. And I was like, this is creepy. And then Saved by the Bell, it was that's all these kids are raging hormone teenagers. They are just sucking everything in. suddenly everywhere I went, I was that guy, that bad actor from that terrible show. I was it was bad acting. And then it was really weird because they come up to you as that person.
Right.
I was like dropping acid and doing comedy for alcoholics at nightclubs. And then suddenly these children are running up and wanting to interact with me. And I'm like, I don't know how anybody does this.
Well, I saw you. You're in high school. You play basketball and right? Isn't that a thing?
Volleyball.
Oh, was it volleyball?
Yeah.
Even better.
I don't play volleyball, but I play a volleyball player on TV.
You did play a volleyball player on TV.
It still plays.
Oh, right. Yeah, because occasionally he gets like $12.73 checks.
Yeah.
Getting those benefits.
Yep. $160 or something like that.
So that was one of those, I wanted to be famous. That's why I went to LA. And then just a little bit of like recognition. And I was like,
maybe I don't.
I like my anonymity. I'm 6'9". I can't put on sunglasses and be incognito. People look at me anyway.
You know, it's a weird thing, but I'm not 6'9", and that happens to me too. It's like people recognize me or see me, and I can put on a performer. I can put on a disguise.
I think you just have a strong energy. Like you have a very.
It doesn't matter. Yeah.
You two both have. You exist very profoundly in the world, and a lot of people are maybe so caught up in their heads that they're not really engaging with the present as much as you guys are, or they just aren't engaging as much, period, as you guys are. You know, like we have a lot of different kinds of mentalities and spirits on the planet, and I think you two have very strong, large, engaged energies.
My friend used to call it a weird magnet. Just attracts weirdos.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Like people would be walking down the street, see me across the street, and walk into traffic to come over and talk to me.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
You know
and there's like the really intense double take, like
you. Like,
it's you.
I don't know who you're seeing, but a lot of people see it. I don't know why.
I love being able to go out to like Salancha is one of our favorite places here in town. It's like having a living room outside your house.
Couches and a
sit on the
table.
couch, and people will be like, "Hey guys," and they come by and visit for a while, and they go away, and then other people come by. I like that when I'm in the mood for it. You know?
Yeah, that is nice.
Yeah,
can be nice.
Tammy Strong says she just told somebody that you were in Saved by the Bell, Dark, after she showed her the stickers, and she asked if the package that you sent Tammy was drugs. So that's why Tammy opened it in front of her.
Oh,
just to prove that it wasn't.
It wasn't that package. It was never mind.
It was an egg, dragon egg, and some stickers.
Artwork and some stickers.
Yeah, that's right. Previous packages we're not saying anything about. No.
All right.
So neurodivergence was the topic that we sort of launched off of. That you mentioned like 3 weeks ago. You were kind of like, you know what? Neurodiversity. And
I threw drugs in there.
Right.
Yeah.
Big pharma medication
into the package.
Big pharma medication versus self-medication. Dark and I love talking about the drug war because it's a very controversial topic and a proven conspiracy theory. Proven conspiracy.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's not a theory anymore. And
it's proven.
And people don't have as strong feelings about it, you know? So like if you start talking about religion or politics, people can get like really personally invested in it. But aside from like personal and loved ones' experiences struggling with abuse of a substance, like it doesn't seem to touch on people's core belief systems as much. So it's easier
if you have loved ones
who saying that. I don't know if that's true.
Long-term imprisoned,
right,
for some dust in a baggie.
Right.
I think like my parents' generation definitely got the hard push of the drug war. And so, like my parents, I don't know if you smoke marijuana in front of my parents, I don't know if they would know what the smell was, even at 86 or 87. They just were never in a place where that was a thing.
Never part of that community.
When they hear about LSD or heroin or marijuana, it's all the same thing.
Yeah, because that's what the brainwashing did to people.
Cocaine or methamphetamine, it's all just drugs that are bad. And so I think people have really strong feelings. If you say, hey, I smoked a joint, you're also a heroin addict, obviously, at the same time.
Then also people tend to not know, or there's at least a chunk of people who don't know that, there are there's prescription heroin, there's prescription methamphetamine.
Yes, right.
That, you know, if a doctor says it's okay,
oh, it's fine.
Then suddenly it's fine. It's the same, virtually the same substance.
It's totally fine.
Right.
Adderall, not even once.
And this touches in. Adderall just made me like just as unproductive, but kind of ragey about it. Kind of like,
so you must not need it.
And I needed mushrooms instead.
Yeah.
I needed something to help me with clenching and anxiety.
Breathing better.
Not that I needed to get more done. I needed to be more okay with the things I was getting done because I was in a state where I was so anxious I couldn't recognize that I was actually already doing enough.
Right.
And so
more okay with not doing or not getting something done too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a theory. I don't know. I think it's my theory.
Okay.
About anxiety. Anxiety, the root of anxiety means to choke. And I think when you have anxiety, you're choking oxygen off to your brain because you're anxious, you're tense. She didn't know she had anxiety until it was brought up.
He was like, blah, 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 your anxiety. I was like, my what?
And then you start looking at what are the characteristics of that. And part of it was she wasn't breathing correctly. She was never doing full breaths. It was always sort of like holding tension.
Right.
And taking little sips of breath because of
like your lungs are only this big instead of
right. And so I think that when you are choking off oxygen to your brain, some slight flight, freeze or fawn business is going on because your brain is not getting full oxygenation. And then us being meaning makers, we start trying to make a meaning for why we feel the way we do. And so we start finding things in our life that are making us anxious when it might be the anxiousness that is causing us to choke.
I would feel differently about those things that are going on if I had enough oxygen.
If you had oxygen, right.
Yeah.
So not having enough oxygen, then you start inventing, it's not inventing, but you start attributing certain things in your life to the way you're feeling when it's the way that you're feeling make you look for things to explain why you feel that way.
Right.
Tammy Sarong says that she's always had a problem with holding her breath almost to the point of passing out without realizing it.
So I found out that, microdosing mushrooms, this is not going to a party dose. It's if you can feel them, you've taken too much. So like the smallest amount of microdosing has...
which is becoming legal in some states.
Right.
Psilocybin is legal in Colorado and Oregon, I think, at this point.
Right. It does it changes... I think it helps with anxiety because people find themselves breathing more clearly. And it also really helps with migraines, which I think migraines are also about oxygen starvation. So migraines and anxiety are different things, but microdosing mushrooms, I know a number of people that have been trying that and have found out that it relieves anxiety and it has something to do with breathing better, relaxing and breathing better.
Why do you think people are like not breathing properly? Like what is the cause of that then?
We've dealt with this a lot this season, which is trauma. So what one of our guests calls the amygdala hijack is like if we get traumatized, and that could be systemic trauma, which is like shitty parenting, or some like crisis event that did something like, let's say a guy with a beard molested me when I was younger, and it was a traumatic event.
Right.
Then every time I see somebody with a beard, my brain does something that I'm not registering on a conscious level, and suddenly I'm no longer an active thinking person. I'm in a reactive state. And so you go into a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode, which then starts doing things to your body
physical
that you're
tension.
not physical tension, right? And then we don't have ways to like in fight, flight, in the wild, when you've outrun the bear. We don't know when we've outrun the bear because it's happening all the time. So we end up being in these perpetual panic states, which alter the way that you're functioning, your whole body is functioning, and then we just make it normal.
Do you think, is there a physiological reason that in fight, flight, or
freeze or fawn
response, that I mean, I'm just thinking in terms of evolution or that kind of thing where there's a productive reason that we would tense our bodies or hold our breath.
Like evolutionarily, like say I was at my cave and then a lion was approaching. I think
you stop breathing.
So that's
right.
That's
right. Moving, right. Yeah.
Maybe it won't notice that I'm edible.
Right. So you pull all your stuff
right.
in.
And that's where the freeze response comes from, is like feeling as though you've entered into an unsafe environment, and that maybe one of my siblings does this and has historically done this in response to my mother's disciplinary conversations.
Right.
I'm trying to be really
Yes.
One of my siblings, that was her response, was to just be quiet until it was over.
Shut down.
Yep. And just not engage, which just made my mom go on longer and longer and longer and longer. Because unfortunately for my mom, because of her own upbringing with her mom,
she wants to see interaction to acknowledge that it's been heard.
Yes. That's one of the ways that she knows that she's in a relationship, because that was how she was in a relationship with her mom, was critical almost all the time.
Right.
And so when you get that imprint, that attachment imprint, rather than a healthy, life-giving attachment imprint, you get like a critical attachment imprint.
Right.
She was almost more comfortable engaging with us by critiquing than by being loving and praising. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I see. And so, I see that quite a bit. I wonder if it's also a cultural aspect to this idea that we need to constantly be improving.
Yes. And that's the burden of the parents, is to do that.
Right.
That's what parents are for.
Well, and also then everything...
sorry.
No problem. Welcome. Everything that your kids do is a direct reflection on you, right. Of you. And so people, I see people do that critiquing thing.
Do you feel like, having stepped away from running a Montessori school for so long, that you're kind of looking back and collating some information about parenting? I mean, like, you were working with really crunchy parents, but if you were to like observe that demographic style of parents, how are the parents doing these days?
I think they're doing much like they've been doing for,
crunchy or not crunchy,
a long time. Parents are humans, and there's just a range of personalities, and there's a number of successes and a number of areas that need improvement or work. I don't know how to. I don't know.
Right.
How to
with all the. I mean, like, that's the way it is for the kids. That's the way it is for the parents and the grandparents. Any demographic has things to work on and things that they're really baller at. So
sure. And I guess I don't see like an overarching. There's helicopter parenting sometimes. I guess there's.
Free range parenting.
There is like
are there any free range parents anymore ever? Does anybody let their kid? I mean,
you used to
go to the park.
Yes,
like
there are still free range parents, and I think that there's a growing sort of movement for that, where people are beginning to realize how important it is to feel autonomous.
They forget that they had that growing up,
right? And it really is important in childhood development. But I do notice too that there's like this other type of panic. I wanted to kind of go back to that conversation. That's not, I don't know that it's necessarily like major trauma or trauma. It's related to maybe criticism in some ways. Like, am I doing it right? Am I doing things right?
Isn't that a trauma though?
I suppose
probably from some kind of trauma.
I suppose it could be. I think it may be a cultural trauma.
There's a story that she told me once that just haunts me, and I think about it all the time because, I think in the current world, people who are my age, like Gen Xers, look at the kids these days as like everything's a fucking trauma. Everybody's like, everything traumatizes the kids these days. And these are people who are probably highly traumatized, so they don't want to admit that. I think I'm really interested in the science of trauma, what's going on around it. They're actually finding out that trauma itself is a physical. It has, like some traumas actually imprint physically.
Right. You can even
on
use
the organism.
Analogy there too, like if you need something more concrete, trauma to the head, right?
Right. Head trauma or something like that, right? But there's a story she told me about. Let's say there's a harried mom. She's got a bunch of kids and all this business is going on. There's a little girl who's like, you know what, my mom, I'm going to show my mom how much I love her. So I'm going to go pick some flowers for her, and then I'm going to walk them into and give them to my mom because she's having a hard day. And so mom has just waxed the floor, and kid comes in from picking the flowers with muddy shoes and thinks that she's doing a nice thing for her mom, but her mom freaks out because of her brand new floor, right? And so that kid is now like confused. I thought I was doing the right thing, and then this thing happened, and there's a cognitive dissonance created.
Right.
And if there's not a conscientious parent who can say, whoa, sorry, you have to understand what happened.
Two separate things are happening here.
Push it, and it goes on. Then the kid is outside wondering, I was just trying to be the best person I could be, and I sent her into a tirade.
Right. What's wrong with me?
What's wrong with me? What did
Obviously,
because you're a kid.
Right. I guess I'm just bad.
How do I not have that happen
Exactly.
again?
Yeah.
Right.
Better constantly adding modifiers to your behavior.
Right.
So that thing doesn't happen again.
Right. And then sometimes it's also then creates this sort of, I don't know what the guidelines are because I don't know when I'm going to be doing something wrong or right, because it doesn't fit with what I believed I was shown, or what I was told would be like, this is a good thing. It wasn't good. So what now?
So now what?
Yeah.
And then when you're 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, and the parent is not aware of the impact that outburst just had, then the kid is left to their own devices to try to wire that into the way they are in the world. So I think there's a lot of little moments that happen,
and that's where I'm thinking of that as like a cultural trauma, because I think that it's not like that child has an abusive parent, or at least maybe not overtly, or
there's always a gradient,
but they, for all intents and purposes, have a very caring, loving, attentive parent that we kind of play out these patterns and this is just part of social evolution, where we're playing out these patterns that we don't always pick up on right away. And then, somebody noticed it. We can give this a name. We can talk about it. We can analyze it. We can start to change it, et cetera, et cetera. But those patterns are there. And so it's, I guess those patterns are created in a broader cultural sense of the shiny floor is important.
Right.
And then also the speed at which we're moving through our activities in a day. So I think that is something that contributes a lot to anxiety in our culture as well. I mean, you can kind of look at different types of cultures globally and see where the rates of anxiety and depression are high versus low. And what speed are people moving at through their day, and what's if there's a lot of information being blasted.
Oh my gosh! Right.
These are things that it sort of creates this internal speed.
Yes.
And then we're like, I can't keep.
Oh yeah. Right.
I think that happens. I see that all the time in the grocery store. Parents, especially moms, the self-consciousness of am I a good mom or not, and then I have things I have to do. I can't actually take time to kneel down in the grocery aisle with my child and explain to them what's going on. I just have to berate them for having a hard time or
Try
a sugar
to get
crash.
Them to shut up.
Yeah. And so many parents speak so disrespectfully and demeaningly to their children to try to prove to whoever might be listening that
they're in
this
charge.
Kid, they're just off the rails.
Right.
And so it breaks my heart every time. Because I know they're only talking to their kid that way because I am also in the aisle.
Right.
Right. They're doing it for you.
Yeah. I'm like, please be in a microcosm with your child.
Yeah. Don't worry about me.
Yes.
And the whole just shut them up thing, like you said too, just hand them a sucker or whatever, just to get them to by all means, do not express the way you're feeling. child. No.
Right.
No,
Right.
your feelings are not valid.
Well, I think there's this other thing that happened in the 70s, 80s, 90s is that the traditional father-mother roles got broken down for better or worse. And so now there's new parenting that's not tied to a long-running cultural expectation. It's just now I have to work and be a mother, right? So now how do I do all of that stuff? Or as a father, like I have to be, these roles got broken down and there were no ready replacements. And so there's this cultural experiment of the 70s, 80s, 90s of how things are going to shake out.
Who's there? Who's going to be there? You know, and then and it's a huge expectation on the parental units to, you know, be and then at work they're working a job and their superior at work is get it done, and maybe they're not kind, and then they're coming home and they're trying to decompress from that, and the kid's like, I need your attention,
and they just pay it
and it's
forward.
like, oh my gosh, I just need to relax, like I need a breath, literally need a breath.
Yes, let's all do that. Hillbilly says, I think schizophrenia is the fight or flight response. This is one of our viewers on YouTube. Some people are broken, creating both those we think of as schizo and those who are thrill seekers. I'm going to read that one more time. I think schizophrenia is the fight or flight response. Some people are broken, creating both those we think of as schizo and those who are thrill seekers. I think that's very interesting, relating schizophrenia with thrill seeking, and the concept of brokenness, I know, goes against the way that we talk about neurodiversity these days. I think people, the way I usually talk about it, which takes more words than broken, is that everybody's born with different kinds of brains and different kinds of brain function, and then are also having different experiences like Tammy and Norm are talking about, where your neuroplasticity is changed and affected chemically by your traumas as you grow.
You're creating you've got your like initial like gears, your movers, and then through your experiences are which pathways those
chemicals
gears are pushing
change.
you.
Right. There was an article or a study done, I think it was in the 60s, where they were trying to show, there was a study on addiction. So they gave rats heroin.
Is this Rat City?
Yeah, well, that's the new one.
Oh, okay.
Right? So like the previous thing was
the
like,
original experiment.
The original was like individual rats, which tend to be group creatures, right? Individual rats in individual cages. They gave them water, they gave them heroin, they took a bunch of heroin. See, heroin's addictive. And then the Rat City experiment was like, let's give them
an actual
let's
community.
let them have sex with each other and have toys to play with and have food and not have the scarcity issue and give them heroin and water, and they didn't pick the heroin. Yeah. And I think that's what's happening to us on a larger cultural, like our structures have been broken down, our community has been broken down.
Right.
I mean, whatever you think about church was community for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
That was outside the bar, outside of the workplace, and outside of the home. So you got to have this other experience of community.
Right.
And with fewer and fewer places to have community that aren't driven by alcohol, which this town in particular, try to go hang out with somebody without booze.
Oh gosh.
It's it's really rampant, I think, across our culture everywhere.
So, yeah, I think
but it's legal, so it's fine.
Right. We have all these chemical squishes that come in all the time from being we're in an unstable society. This is not like some ancient culture that we're preserving. It's constantly like TV came in, and what did that do to everybody?
Right.
Like we've never really done, like, people when they started studying TV, like TV came out in the, I don't know, 50s or something like that.
The New Babysitter.
The New Babysitter, right? And then, you know, people in Canada were like, well, what's prolonged exposure to this thing do? And it was horrible. And like, yeah, we'll just keep doing it. And we haven't really gone back and looked at that, like the effect that television had on a whole generation of people on terms of their idea of love, their idea of themselves, comparing. We have a Airbnb guest that came through a year or so ago, and she's coming back through, and she's one of those people. She's got to be maybe 70 something.
Are you talking about Miss Penn?
Yeah.
She's been trying to come back and visit us for like 6 months now.
Yeah, and she's like one of these people that is pre-internet, And I think it's really interesting because she's a complete individual. The way she interacts, the way she talks, the way she references herself, the way it's all individualized, and you're not going to see that anymore because everybody's been homogenized through this thing.
Right.
So we know how to behave from this cast of characters.
Right.
That like archetypes. Mm-hmm. But I think all our various cultures that came to America, there were still residuals of those cultures in the DNA of people. And so you had very unique individuals. Right. And we don't have the same, I think, ability to have very unique individuals because we're all been memified generationally.
Well, if you...
And that has like chemical
consequences
in the brain. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I mean, when you're talking about culture, basically a culture is a homogenized group of people, right? So all of those different cultures that were coming from homogenized cultures. So how important is it to be the unique individual? And is that a construct of our culture?
The U.S. culture or just human having a culture in general?
I mean the U.S. culture like that we're in, because when you look on a global scale, and especially, or even historically, and you look at tribal, it's not that the unique individual didn't exist, but there wasn't a huge amount of importance.
We didn't really need to talk about it.
We are working as a unit, and it is, each person has their job in that unit, but nobody is seen as a separate individual. This is something that we're doing as a whole group, and if it doesn't work as a whole group, like there's an ailment, someone might be the liver, and the liver needs help, and so then all of the people go to the liver, and we're gonna fix and heal here and make it good so that our whole unit operates correctly. I'm not sure when. I don't know if you guys have an idea of pinpointing maybe culturally when this idea of, I notice it a lot in musicianship or music, right? There's, at some point we broke from the tribal idea where everybody here participates in music and it's done as a group thing to there is somebody
Certain
who is talented
music
and is on the stage, and they are this sort of amplified special being, and
that is a very U.S. thing.
Well, I think it's
Western white.
Western, it's Apollonian. It's the Apollo.
What's Apollonian?
Apollo, the Apollo figure, the solar figure.
But like there are cultures where everybody still sings, like India and the continent of Africa.
Microcultures too, like my family. I grew up, we all sang together. Like it's a group activity.
We did because of the church. Everybody just sang.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you're not singing, you're clapping.
Yeah.
Right.
Or, you're doing something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Why did your family grow up singing?
Why?
Were you guys part of a church too?
My my grandparents were in the Mormon faith, and my and somewhere before I was born, they left the Mormon church, and all of my mom and all of her siblings were like not really ever majorly in it. So
they grew up like where they'd go to church and sing.
I think it's like I don't think they were all adults when they left the Mormon church, so I don't know exactly where that happened. And then there were kind of these various. So I don't know if it's a church related thing or I think it's cowboy culture actually.
Oh,
sitting around the campfire.
Yeah, being on the range and like moving the cows.
I like that.
I had to think about that for a minute, but yeah, that's where that comes from in my family.
I looked up neurodivergent, and you know how Google goes, people also ask, but I didn't ask anything. I just put in neurodivergent. But what is considered neurodivergent? This is what Google is going to tell us about it. Neurodivergent refers to an individual who has a less typical cognitive variation, such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, etc. Neurotypical refers to the individuals of typical development and intellectual cognitive functioning.
Quote unquote typical.
Typical. Is neurodivergent a disability? Is the next question. neurodiversity has its roots in the social model of disability, which considers disability to be a civil rights issue. The social model rejects the notion that an individual must be normal to enjoy the full range of human experience, arguing that an impairment should not constitute a barrier to inclusion or access. And I think that the term impairment is kind of interesting too, because I think we are, as Bill Hicks says, evolution didn't end with us growing thumbs. We're still morphing and developing all the time.
There's a really cool thing I read about that recently too, about how, so it used to be that the social evolution was happening directly from your family unit parenting, and because of now how we're socially connected through media, you're getting it through like multiple sources. So there's a faster paced social evolution happening.
Yes, and every new group of kids is it like our generations used to be like 20-ish years, and now it's like we're experiencing that same effect like every 5 years.
Yeah. Right.
There's new terminology, new technologies, new trends, new things that you should be doing or knowing. Gosh.
So arguing that an impairment should not constitute a barrier to inclusion or access, I think it would be really easy to argue that Jeff Bezos would be neurodivergent. I don't think he's neurotypical. If you look at his rise and where he came from and the way his brain works.
Neurotypically, he would be more empathetic. Is that
perhaps
is that the proposal?
More empathetic, but also like, he might be Aspergery. I think there's some Asperger's involved in that
passion, the drive.
Which, so is it an impairment that caused him to be a multi-billionaire?
Right. Well,
is that an impairment?
I know
and is that healthy, what he's doing?
Yeah. And so does he have a diagnosis? And then this has come up for me a lot, the idea of a diagnosis and all of that. And so, I think where we start to look at it, where we focus on it as people or culturally, individuals or culturally is what I meant, is when we notice that it is impeding someone's ability to function within our society.
Right.
Which may have something to do...
dysfunctional. The society itself
right. The society might be dysfunctional, not necessarily right.
It's very
so
dysfunctional.
Yes, the impairment to interact, normally
Can you get in
with
line,
the society.
Please?
Right.
Wait, what?
I said, can you get in line, please?
Oh, right.
The whole thing.
The queuing. I was like, did I talk over her? Oh my God.
So I dropped out of high school after my first year. So I completed 9 grades, and then later on secondary, or what do they call college?
Tertiary.
Yeah. Thank you.
So you did your GED and then went to college?
Yeah.
Nice.
But when I dropped out, it was very much this moment where I was sitting in the grass on the hill, and the sky was just like one of those piercing blues with little white puffy clouds all over it. Mm-hmm. And just, it was so enjoyable. I felt so good right there. And then the bell rang for lunch to be over. And it was like being shaken from a dream a little bit. And so I was waking up slowly. Yeah. And I'm watching all of the other students like moving toward the building. And it was like cattle. It was like the cattle bell and the cattle going into the thing. And I was like, oh no, I'm not going back in there.
Oh, snap. Yeah. I'm sensing some dysfunction.
Get in line. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's, does that make me... Neurodivergent. Well, I don't think there's a lot of question there. But.
Yeah.
I think the way that we use the language around neurodiversity, I think it's a nice term, diverse versus so I have synesthesia, which some people, so I call it a condition, right? It's not an impairment. I call it a condition. because I think for some people it could be an impairment.
So synesthesia, for those of you that might not know, I learned about synesthesia from a really cool book called A Mango-Shaped Space. And they don't mean mango the fruit, they mean mango the color, a mango-colored shaped space. And it was a fiction novel, a youth fiction novel about a girl who had synesthesia. And it's where, in general, it's where you associate two things that people say you're not supposed to associate, such as you look at numbers and you see, you think of the number 4 as smelling sweet. Or for me, I've always associated my sister Coco with the color purple for no reason in particular.
Or letters, somebody, when they read on the page, E always glows a little yellow and C always glows a little red. But somebody else might have that same thing, but it's different colors.
So is it multiple, it's blending senses?
It's blending senses in an atypical way.
Processing on dual modalities. So
You
the
might
idea
look
is
at it
like
as crossed wires.
when you taste spearmint and you can't not have an image of green like crystal spires. That's processing. That's just a flavor, but your brain is getting
giving it a
visual.
Right.
Or some people, like a trumpet sounds like golden balls. Right. And so that would be. Some people don't know what the hell you're talking about when you say that. Some people are like, oh, of course I know what you're talking about.
So
right.
A lot of people just hear stuff and smell stuff and
Right.
see stuff and don't also perceive other things. They don't also perceive, like, I think
there's not a dual modality.
Right.
And so you end up putting one. So like the one that I have probably more than anything else is what they call sort of like a metaphorical synesthesia. So I am always thinking in metaphors. Every time somebody tells me, I hear it in two different, like a mythic level and a consensus level, or it's coming in two different ways. And then when I'm trying to explain something to somebody, I was always giving metaphors for the thing because that's readily available. I didn't have to think of a metaphor.
Right.
The metaphor was always there.
It's already happening. Sure.
And our friend mentioned schizophrenia. I think I would have been diagnosed as a schizophrenic in my 20s if I had had insurance. Yeah. But I didn't have insurance, so I wasn't diagnosed. But what happened to me was that my metaphorical and my consensus flipped. So that now I was living in a mythic realm,
right,
where there were timeless beings.
I feel like that happens. Well, maybe not. I feel like synesthesia might be more common than.
I think maybe it's one of those things like when it goes around on the internet and you've got the white and gray dress or the blue and green dress,
sure.
you know, and everybody's like, wait, some people don't see white and gray,
right?
You know, and you're suddenly realizing, or like people who think without hearing a voice saying the thing that they're thinking.
Right. Or people who don't have even like any kind of like an inner dialogue running, like, or
like
or
I can't count as fast as Dark can count because I'm verbalizing the words in my mind, which is sort of also tied to another thing that I've been told it has to do with the autism spectrum, which is like an imitative behavior. So if we're just
no, it's really common in females with autism.
We're just tooting around, doing our day, and Dark says something, and I don't really need to respond, or I'm not really totally engaged with what he's saying, and I just sort of like repeat what he said in the same tone, or I'll go
which
like,
sounds like she's mocking me.
Yeah,
because
it sounds
she's
like
doing like some sort of tone.
So
he'll be like, "Stay here, Billie Jean," and I'll be like, "Me, murmur."
So that's really funny. I read recently, so when I was little, like really young, up through like maybe kindergarten, first grade, maybe, I think they abandoned it after first grade for me, but there was some concern that I was autistic, or there was concern. And then
right,
it was
because
like,
what would that mean for your ability to function and represent your family well?
Right. And in my family, I'm not sure it was so much about the representing the family, but just, you know, is there something that we should be taking note of and doing differently?
To support,
right. So thankfully, thanks family.
Yeah.
But it was also like the late 80s, and like, I don't remember ever going to see somebody or like be actually assessed. It was just kind of this like, do you think she's autistic? She might be autistic. Wow. And like talking with the teachers even, like this thing, right? And so I was looking up, I was just kind of researching autism. Like, what is the deal there?
Yeah.
And
how would one describe this autism you speak of?
It used to be that it was primarily thought of as something that primarily affected boys. And what they've discovered somewhat recently is that the reason for that was because the females with autism would more quickly learn to imitate neurotypical behavior.
It's fine.
Well, and really, like, all humans learn through imitative behavior, right?
Right.
So that is a thing, and if there's somebody that's yelling in your home a lot, you're going to learn to yell.
Right.
If they're, that's just a simple example.
But then we also can talk about like neurotypical versus sociopath or psychopath. Like a psychopath is somebody that doesn't give a shit about behaving neurotypically and also does not have the empathy necessary to care about the consequences of their behavior. A sociopath does not care about the consequences of their behavior, but knows enough to imitate neurotypical empathy.
Right.
So they're just sort of in observance of the human experience and deciding what they do or don't do based on which consequences they want, but it's not because they care about you.
Right. Well, and that's
we
interesting.
glorify that in this culture. Like most of the people
being
who
detached.
Are the most wealthy, powerful people tend to be more sociopathic.
Right. Like you can't actually get ahead in the capitalist system without squishing someone else.
Or yourself.
Right. So we reward sociopathy in this, and we glorify it and we idolize it.
Yeah.
Which is a mindfuck. I was raised in the 80s with lifestyles of the rich and famous, and the only thing worthwhile. So my little developing being is like, how do I get laid most? And then I look at Robin Leach telling me that you have to have this car and this house and all this stuff. I'm like, well, that's where you get all the chicks. So nobody else was telling me.
Right.
Except the TV was, and it was about basically having excess so that I could attract excess.
Right.
Stuff. Well, stuff which attract a broader mating pool.
Right.
Like on the deeper level, that's what I was going for. It was like, I want to figure out how to bang the most chicks. How do I attract the most chicks to be banged by me? And that's
some
what
form
Robin
of
Leach
that,
told me.
Some form of that is, I think at the root of all human decision making is, whether but just some form of like, wanting to connect with other humans. Wanting to be accepted, loved, included,
seen,
and heard,
seen and heard. Yeah.
So that was another one I wanted to say about the panic mode, because that's another place where I think people start to seize up and not breathe properly, is feeling like they're not being heard. And I know some people. I have some friends right now that
loved ones,
some loved ones that. I think that, like, and I don't know, this is really just a theory, but somewhere in their life, they felt extremely unheard. And so you cannot get a word in edgewise with these guys. And like, you can sit. And I've had a couple instances where I just listened long enough that I heard them go, like, I finally was heard.
Now, was it that you listened long enough? Because this is something that really came to me this February or so when I was going through a really hard time. And I was like, really, telling me you understand is different than me having a sense that you understand. And without having a sense that you understand, I'm going to keep telling you things.
Oh, sure. Like,
I feel like that's
also has to be understanding.
And that's the being seen and heard. That's where it came to me. I'm like, really, that's the core of so much conflict is, you do something and you do it wrong and you say you're sorry. But if that person doesn't feel like you understand the impact of that event had on them, sorry doesn't mean shit.
Right.
But I feel like that's the second phase.
I think
the
that's
first phase is I need to know that I can say all the things that I need to say.
Okay.
And you start there.
Right.
And I think it's also more of a female thing to need to do that, to just be heard, and then potentially stereotypically male to be understood in the hearing.
Could be.
Or second, like, once I've said all the things, then I need to feel like you know what I'm talking about. But if you can't even get past
silence,
if you can't say the thing, because guys, you start saying the things, and then the guys will be like, "How do I fix it?" before you said the thing.
Or
how do I stop it? How do I stop you from talking and I can solve the problem?
Yeah.
Well, and sometimes it's there's also, and this is something that I noticed in myself. I had a partner who spoke really slowly with these long drawn out pauses, and I come from a family that's like pretty much always talking over each other at like and listening like simultaneously, right? It's like this weird multitasking communication thing. And I'm like in just like, it is so hard to listen to you talk so slowly and take all these long pauses, but I'm really trying. And before he would get to the end of his thing, there'd be this extra long pause. And in that, well, to me, I mean, it's really not. And in that time, I would think of literally like 100 different things that could go there.
Yes.
Like that could end that spot.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then he would finish, and it was a one I hadn't thought of every single time.
What?
And so it really,
so that was really rewarding for you.
It drew attention to how often we like assume we know where someone's going with what
I just
they're
did
saying.
it. I just automatically tried to fill in your blank with assume.
It was though. It was assume.
Thank you.
That time it was
Oh my gosh.
Don't ever try to move to the South.
No, I have that problem. No, it's not a
That's
problem.
what I had in the South is the people, and maybe they're more healthy because they're not as rushed. But I like lived in Los Angeles for 10 years during my 20s. So everything is like, let's get to the point. And so like people in the South, I'm wanting to finish every sentence coming out of their face. And so like I found myself last week, like just folding tinfoil during my show. And I'm like, I can listen if I'm doing something. If I'm not doing something, I'm trying to finish your sentence
so that we
for
can
you.
be
So
doing
we can
something.
do something. Yes.
I wonder about that as a neuro thing because I almost wonder if that's an ADHD type thing because I have to be like in school.
Would you like a turn?
Oh, thank you. I would get in trouble for it a lot because I would like have to be doodling.
Heaven forbid.
Doodling.
Right,
or I would like my brain had to be divided doing multiple things or I could not retain. And so if I wasn't allowed to draw, I inevitably would just go into like imaginary world. And I think that might have been part of the like, is she autistic thing? Because I would just totally retreat internally into this other world.
And for people that don't know what it's like to just go somewhere else and have an imagination sort of thing, I don't mean that in a mean way, but like they're like, what is wrong with her?
What's going on? Hello, interact, be here now.
I was thinking about the mermaids that live behind the waterfall in my shower.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't just take a shower.
The witch is back. She's floating behind me.
I had the witch that floated behind me too. It was always just out of my periphery.
Right.
You know,
Potentially
can't quite see her.
it was the Carlos Castaneda called it death.
Haunted as a child.
There was a pointy hat witch that was always just out of my.
Did she have a giggle? Did she giggle?
I don't know if she had a giggle.
Okay. Do you think you were actually haunted?
Carlos Castaneda called it death. That your death is always on. And he said it was on a particular shoulder. I can't remember which one. But when I would be walking through a field at my grandparents' house, I could always feel the witch walking, and I would spin sometimes because I'm like, I'm going to catch her this time, right? So I'd be walking with my parents. I'd be walking through the field, and suddenly I'd just start spinning, trying to catch the witch.
Yeah.
And then I just gave up trying to catch the witch, and so then I would have conversations with the witch. But the witch was always just. I could always feel like the shadow. Catching the shadow of this other entity, but never actually catching it. And so my imagination just made a pointy hat witch thing out of it.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of really amazing comments.
We
have some like people.
Our audience is participating.
We're just going like
talk about
when they're just. It's really awesome. Tammy Strong just said multitasking is an art. And I have found that the older I get, the more I'm realizing, for me at least, it's more of a curse than an art. It's a thing that I think I can do, but it's actually a product of me not being able to be present. That I need to be doing several things at once because being present and only doing one thing at a time isn't good enough. Something that I've been meditating on for like 20 years is this 4-part miniseries based on the kids' books Dinotopia, where these two brothers crash land on like a Bermuda Triangle-esque island that still has dinosaurs and humans coexisting. And they have to learn the 10 rules of Dinotopia in order to become citizens. And one of the rules of Dinotopia is do one thing at a time. And I just think about that all the time.
How hard that.
How it's so.
It's
and
hard.
then somebody recently said something that was even more helpful, which is you can only actually ever be doing one thing at a time. You can't actually be doing two things at a time.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with that.
Like when I do my artwork, so like, I sand things, right? So if I'm sitting and having a conversation with somebody.
And then there's
internal
receiving,
Okay,
like
right.
like I can't do the laundry and do the dishes at the same time, but I can do the laundry and listen to a podcast at the same time.
Okay. Because like for me, like I can listen better if it looks like I'm distracted to the person who's talking to me.
Yeah.
Like they will say, why aren't you listening to me? I'm like, I'm so much more listening to you right now.
Right.
And some people who are my friends can understand that. And then we have great conversations. And I feel like there are other conversations that make me drop the thing and then fully engage.
Right.
But there are other times where like in order to listen, because it might be a lag, it's the time lag thing. Like I'm already projecting into the future where you're going. And so it's hard for me to be present in that.
It's something to do with presence because if I don't have this like other like thing that I'm doing with my hands, the fidgety thing or the artwork, or like then it's actually my brain that needs it though. It's not necessarily a physical thing that has to be happening. But if I'm trying to focus solely on this without that other thing, then my brain will still do another thing, and so then it'll
trail off. Yeah.
It's existing here, and I need this part to exist on a focus track. So I'm going to take that little piece of brain and put it right here.
That's why I think it's so much easier to learn from audiovisual education rather than just somebody talking or somebody reading.
And that's where in the literature they will say that is an impairment.
The neurodiversity literature. The fact that you can't just sit and absorb.
Impaired.
Oh boy.
Where part of me wonders, like, no, we're evolving in a lot of different directions, and
Definitely.
just like there's these. There was I'm an apocalypse watcher. I've always been watching apocalypses, and there's always an end of the world. Like every couple of years or so, there's a big one coming.
Right.
And so for me, it was the church. It was the end of the world was happening through the church. And then when I'm like, I'm no longer a part of that, I kept looking for the end of the world. And Robert and Tom Wilson introduced me to this thing that Terrence McKenna was talking about, which was the omega point, which was information doubles at an exponential rate. So what used to take 4,500 years for humans to develop a new thing, then it was like 750 years, and then it was like 50 years, and then...
Like the generational thing.
The idea was that eventually you hit an omega point. And I think everybody was expecting like a new dimension to open up or something crazy was going to happen. I think we hit the omega. Kurzweil also talked about that a lot too. And he was like... He's the guy who was going to be immortal by taking the right supplements, and he invented the Moog synthesizer, Kurzweil.
I think we desire a super event.
Yes, and so I think the idea was that, and for me it was like Y2K. I was like, Y2K is just about credit card debt. Everybody wants the end of the world because they're so fucking far in debt, and they think that will relieve them. The doomsday bug's going to erase their debt, and so people wanted the end of the world to happen.
Or they're in a loveless
They really
marriage.
wanted that to happen.
Right. They just sort of relieves all the pressures.
Something that you feel like you can't leave.
And then it's like, but you forgot. Now you also can only sleep in this rubble.
Right. Right. But the exponential time wave theory was basically saying it's going to keep doubling to the point where you hit the omega point, and then it's going to be a new world. And I think we hit it. And I don't think it's going to be humanity bottlenecking into one thing. I think it's like there's a great visual, like a time lapse of a sheep going from one field to another through a fence. And like whatever culture constrains us as a thing, I think we went through a fence somewhere in the last few years, and now we're all
sort of like an
hourglassy
shape. And the laws of nature say that we that we can come together, control, contain, and then explode into chaos, and then come together, control, contain, and explode into chaos. So
and so like our societies are trying to make us a thing, like we're managed as societies. Like this coronavirus thing, the way that it was managed by many different nation states, the way it was managed was to make people fearful of the event in order to get them to comply to the mandates. So the government was saying, we need to make them afraid, otherwise they won't do the necessary thing. So that is one of those things that I find we're being managed, our psyches are being managed as a whole, but I think outside that gate, we're moving in a lot of different directions. Society is trying to keep us corralled. But I think we're evolving, and there's the people who want to integrate with, what do you call them, the people who want to merge with machines. What is that?
Technosynthesis. No. Well, I mean, you could say it that way.
It's a movement. It's a movement.
Oh, okay.
It's like what's it called? An android.
Technocratic.
But, no.
Cyborg.
It's not a cyborg. Anyway,
cyborg is merging with physical technology, and this is talking about like neurological technology blending.
Okay.
Like I want to learn Spanish.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that is physical to me.
Oh yeah, I guess that's true.
So I'm looking for there are people who are saying we're going to be able to just like download our memories from the day, put it on a hard drive, integrate and like
an episode of Black Mirror.
The positive side of it is like we will be able. My arm's been chopped off, but I've been able to cyborgize it. So like I've connected the nerves to or my synapses now like wirelessly are now talking to these things, so I can operate. That's the utopian side of man machine.
Right.
But and people there's always people who are afraid of the movement. It seems to me we're going to go that way.
Sure.
Humans and machines are going to meld. I don't think all humans and machines are going to meld.
Or maybe we already have.
We have to I mean, this is with us all the time.
Right.
A lot of us, right? So we don't have the memory we used to have because you don't have to retain it. Everything is right there.
I don't remember the 50 phone numbers that I used to like.
No.
Right. This is your external, you have an external memory bank now. And the idea is that eventually it's not going to be external.
Right.
And so some people will love that and they want to go that way, and other people are not going to want to do that. And this is that thing that I'm talking about. I think there's going to be a bunch of different kinds of human coming out in the next 100 years.
Right.
And because of the exponential time
you think we're going to have a place to live that long?
It's going to be, the world's going to be fine.
Probably not going to be like this.
I think the people who maybe move more into the man-machine thing might be able to adapt themselves to more extreme conditions.
Yeah, I'm not saying that Earth itself would die. Right. I'm saying, will it be
Our
habitable for us?
We might not be hiking as much.
Our ability to live the way we have may not remain the same. It doesn't look like it's going to remain the same. So there will be people who adapt to that.
Right.
And some of it might be machine. It might not be machine. But some people will adapt to that.
Mm-hmm.
Norm Goodwin says, imagine immortality. If you literally couldn't die in a few trillion years, you'd be pretty upset. Even...
I don't even think it would take that long.
Trillion is a lot.
Yeah.
Even without a planet, other living beings, and nothing but empty space, immortality would be hell.
Well, that is almost like what, there are some religions and philosophies like Buddhism, let's say, that is what is
Hinduism,
happening.
Yeah.
We are this one entity alone, and you could argue that that's why, like Hinduism, the Maya is part of it, because the imagination of the one, like, doesn't want to be alone, so I'm fragmented then into all of these things. That
I am my dog and my flower bed and my personhood and my best friend.
And I am like my cells and my veins and my, eternally macro and micro.
Sounds very neurodivergent.
It gets very boring
as far as the Maya goes.
It's just the repeated pattern over and over again, eternally outward and inward.
The easiest version is like we are God playing hide and seek with itself. That's the idea. Is that
that's fun.
That's a nice thing to meditate
we
on.
forget in order to remember. And that's the game.
Yeah. And it's that same pattern.
Oh my God, we're all going to die. Oh wait, we were never alive.
It's the same pattern of containment, release.
Yeah.
Containment, release.
In breath, out breath, all that.
Yeah.
Gary, way on back at the beginning of the show when we were talking about psilocybin therapy, which has been legalized in several states. Well, I say several, like 5. Gary is wondering if you guys have opinions on ketamine therapy and or have heard about its uses.
I have an ex-brother-in-law who studied ethnobotany when he was going to school at Berkeley. And he and a friend were...
How fun.
He and a friend were out for a mountain bike ride and came across an old abandoned barn, and found like cases of ketamine. Still in the bottle, still just like there.
Is that horse tranquilizers?
It's
colloquially known as
a horse tranquilizer.
Yes.
Okay,
Technically called a dissociative. So he got into that batch and really started liking it. And his version, he said, like, LSD helps you access the God without, ketamine helps you access the God within. That was his breakdown of how that works.
You can describe, practically speaking, the experience of ketamine is usually gives you a feeling like everything's going to be okay.
Everything's going to be okay.
Which, for someone who's in an extremely traumatized state, to be given the reminder that it's possible to feel like everything's going to be okay is sometimes the pathway that you need.
So now, is that going to be okay? I'm really curious about this because I've recently or semi-recently been around people when they are on ketamine.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so
which there are several different ways to take it and different levels.
Recreational versus
around some folks who kind of know and have been there and are seeking that whatever feeling that provides. They seem mostly at ease. There's something called the K-hole.
Yeah.
Where you just basically have to lay down. You cannot do or like sit down. You can't. You're like immobilized.
Words don't work so much.
And some people will like be like really like kind of laughy in that state. Other people are just quiet. But then I had so I'd been observing people for a minute doing like there was like a period of time. And then I happened to be around when someone took it for the first time.
Oh. And had they done any other psychedelics or mind-altering things before?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And like this was all like a big study for me because I'm interested in drugs and what they do to the mind and also would I like to try that or not? I'm going to observe and study that first before I do something like that. And so without having ever done it myself, this person took it and was not having a good experience.
Really?
At all. And so it was...
What did that look like for that person?
It looked like panic and like some crying and things. And so I just kind of sat with them and... just because I'd been studying it for a minute, was able to kind of talk this person through it.
Yeah.
And was like, I'll just like be here with you and like, and
everything that you're used to still exists.
I think maybe the feeling, whatever feeling they were receiving from that particular medicine was, maybe so jarring to their usual self and reality and experience that it caused a panic state of some kind.
I think it can challenge the ego.
Well, now let me speak in on this one. It's very similar to why people continue to be attracted to abusive or unhealthy partners. It's familiarity. I think feeling peaceful is just as shocking when you have been feeling unsafe.
Right.
It can be terrifying to feel peaceful because you're afraid that you're not perceiving something that must be happening to you in your environment because you've been so used to your environment feeling unsafe.
I'm comfortable in chaos.
Yes.
What is going on here? It's uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar. Yeah, sure. I can see that.
Anal sex. It's going to hurt if you keep clenching.
If you go in too fast.
Yes, exactly. Right. It's a different experience if you're relaxed. So I think that's a real thing. And the gentleman that I mentioned before, he became a psychotherapist. It was illegal to use it in therapy at the time. He did use it with extreme cases. So somebody has got a divorce, and then it was a really contentious divorce, and then he lost his job, but he finally had the kids for a vacation, and then there was a car wreck where one of the kids was killed, and it's like, I'm just going to kill myself. And he's like, before you do that, go do an intramuscular injection. Just give yourself the K-hole. And then these people will call the next day and go, okay, I can do this. And I think there's a threshold. I think if you get close to the threshold, it can be terrifying of realizing if you identify too much with your current, that's why it's called a dissociative, because it sort of zooms you out of your scene for a minute. And if you don't get all the way out of the scene, they can feel the terror of like trying to hold on to everything that you think is going to keep you sane.
Because you're used to it. And then I think if you can let go of that, it gives you a moment of like, oh, wait, I was clenching so hard and I could just let go and realize, like, I've done ketamine a few times, and I did it in the sort of psychotherapeutic sense where you had a threshold hit intramuscular. So it was like 45 minutes. You're not going to go dancing. You're just laying there. Right, you're just laying there. Which I think is really beneficial.
You're not going dancing.
Because it takes your frontal lobe offline. We're so used to running things in modern human society with like, I need to be aware and conscious and have verbalizations about what's going on.
Right, which is why some people also panic really hard. Yeah. Even just if they get drunk.
Right.
Yes.
Because it's like,
I need to be able to verbalize.
I can't be in control here. Yeah.
And rather than, the K-hole takes you to a place where it's just whatever is souping around in your brain.
It gets beyond the control mechanism. And the experiences that I had were pleasant.
Right.
Because it was like, I've done DMT before in the past. And the DMT experience that a lot of people talked about and that I had, there was an aha moment of like, oh, wait, I've been freaking out over stuff that's totally ridiculous that I don't need to freak out about, right? So it was a release. And I think ketamine can do the same thing without the circus involved, because often there's a circus involved with DMT. There's like entities, and there's this whole archetypal realm that you can go into 22 different doors and either be in the Hindu world or the Native American world or the people in the white robes world. So this is where
I would almost go to the other thing, which is it the right medicine for you?
Right.
For what you need therapy for. Yeah.
We both need glasses. The prescription is different.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Right. And I think especially as our culture, how many people are more neurodivergent than neurotypical?
Probably more.
Right.
Probably more people are neurodivergent than quote unquote neurotypical, but we are all working so hard to mask and normalize our behaviors so that we don't get ostracized and lose love and community.
And institutionalized.
That's the explosion thing
experimented on, essentially.
We keep trying to normalize to the point where more people are not neurotypical. And yet the story is there's a typicality that isn't there anymore.
Right.
And I think that's going to be, we're going to face that.
And how much diversity is there
that we could be expressing and experiencing?
There's probably like quite a bit more than we realize. And when we, start talking about like for autism now, I don't think Asperger's is used anymore. It's just the spectrum.
The spectrum, right? Somewhere on the spectrum.
Okay.
And so where Asperger's used to describe high functioning autism.
Oh, really? I thought they were two separate.
Well,
conditions. I didn't know.
I would say research that, everyone, because
we can do it right now.
I mean, it's been a while since I've looked at that, but
that's quite possible though. They seem very similar.
My understanding.
Yeah.
But so then thinking about just neurofunction as a spectrum, and as a spectrum in terms of like colors, the light spectrum.
Yes, which we don't have any moral judgment around.
Right.
What distinguishes Asperger's disorder from classic autism are its less severe symptoms and the absence of language delays. Children with Asperger's disorder may be only mildly affected, and they frequently have good language and cognitive skills. So I guess extreme autism means that your the language faculty isn't as functional as somebody with Asperger's.
Sure.
So you were correct.
Okay. Ish.
Norm Goodwin says that he has a theory that when you take a hallucinogen, you never really come down, but that your brain acclimates sort of like we acclimate vision, where technically we're all seeing things upside down because of the structure of our eyeball and how light works. But we acclimate it to...
So we assimilate those things into our...
Those things that we've begun to have access to by having a neurodiverse experience on an entheogen or a hallucinogen. And he says, so really we are all still tripping.
Yay.
I like that theory, Norm.
Well, yeah. And I like to put that into with the thing we were talking about earlier, where we're like the one entity, like let's just, just for fun.
Right. What if everything is one?
Yeah.
So then also that like with time, then what that does with time is that like we're still tripping. We always were tripping.
Always will have been tripping. Right. Space-time is a total like living being construct.
Right.
Space-time exists in, I am really curious if there are like any animals that don't experience space-time. I know that they age. So we've got mitochondrial functions that we're talking about here.
Well, everything changes over time.
Right. But is there anything existing right now that we could perceive, but we're not aware that they're not existing? They're not burdened by space-time? Perhaps
the witch behind.
The witch,
floating behind us. Actually, I heard something. Tanner shared something with me yesterday. I wish I could remember the names of the guys. Tanner, if you're out there, throw a comment.
Let us know.
Let us know who the guys were that you played that discussion for me about hauntings being time travel instead. Where it's like you've got like the little kid ran through the kitchen, but then like
it was a podcast.
You don't remember that when you were a little kid, you actually saw the you now standing there too.
I have one of those stories from my own personal life.
Ooh, yeah, do tell.
So
like a wormhole of yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was in fourth grade, and I had really shitty eyesight, and I hadn't been diagnosed yet, or they hadn't figured out my prescription. They didn't know I need glasses. So I moved to a new town. I was the weirdo because everybody knew each other since before diapers, and I didn't know any of them. So I sat in the back of the room because I didn't want to cause too much attention, which means I could not see the board. So a test came, and I didn't know anything about what was going on. Right. So I'm sitting there, and I have my pencil, and I'm panicking because I don't know how I'm going to do this. And I remember looking at the clock and having a mild panic, and then I heard everybody's pencils get louder and louder, and it became this roar of everybody else's pencils. And then suddenly the second hand, it looked like the second hand grabbed the minute hand and pulled it down 30 minutes, and the bell rang.
What?
And I walked out of the classroom with this image in my head that I had long hair, I was driving a Jeep, and I was in Los Angeles. And from that point on, I was like, I'm just going to Los Angeles. I'm going to go to Los Angeles, blah, 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 right? So I'm 21 years old. I'm driving to go host an open mic in Los Angeles. I have long hair, and I'm driving a Toyota Land Cruiser, which looks like a Jeep, no top, no doors. And I'm driving along, and suddenly I heard this rush of the pencils.
Whoa.
And I was like, where am I? And it was like that came into my head, and I was looking, I'm like, where am I? I'm like, I looked in the mirror, I have long hair, I have this Jeep, and I'm like, where am I? And I saw like a billboard that said Los Angeles Times. I'm like, I'm in fucking Los Angeles. And then I was back driving again, and I was like, what the fuck was that?
But you had that moment where you forgot.
So your haunting was your past self actually
into your
went into your body.
Oh my gosh.
It was not just a haunting, it was a possession.
It was like
possessed yourself.
I possessed myself in the future. Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy.
I have a few of those. Where those wormholes happened.
Hillbilly has brought up this concept several times as we talk about neurodiversity. And he's just saying this versus coalition of the weak versus survival of the fittest.
Coalition of the weak. All right.
I think the language itself has various moral judgments associated with each of those terms.
Right.
But if we step away from that, I think societally, at least in the West, it's been a conscious and subconscious valuation of survival of the fittest since that concept was brought up by Darwin in the 1800s. It was like survival of the fittest, which is obviously the best idea, and we should all do that. And then we start valuing the fittest people, whether they're the richest people, the smartest people, the prettiest people, the strongest people,
or just the people who have the most babies.
Right. Whatever the fittest is in our various cultures and subcultures. Versus coalition of the weak, which I don't know what Hillbilly means by weak or coalition of the weak himself, but
I think
what is the versus? What's the opposite mindset or the post-Orthodox mindset of survival of the fittest?
Well, I think as we're moving, as humans are becoming more neurodivergent, obviously becoming more, as a species, we're becoming more neurodivergent because of all the things that have happened in the last 100 years.
All of the psychedelics that have been eaten.
And all the television that we've watched, all the computer stuff that has happened, and all these different, the availability of all the information at once and some people take it in various directions. So I remember when I was in my 20s and I was reading Robert Anton Wilson, and he kept talking about the hive, of getting out of the hive. So like when I'm in the city, there's this hive thing, and I don't want to be in the hive. Don't want to be a bee that's doing the whole thing. I want to be my own person and do my own thing. And I always looked at the hive as obviously the hive is a terrible thing, but I'm like, look at a beehive. It's this amazing, functioning, beautiful project. And it's selfless. The people involved are selfless, and they are energetically mind connected to do a thing, and some people aren't cut out for that.
Right.
They don't serve that function. You don't riff on that program.
Right. Their project is somewhere else. It's not a hive. It's a hill, or it's
and why not be able to have that and that? I think the hive, we have a lot of benefits from having hive-minded people who are doing all kinds of amazing things.
Absolutely.
I don't think they have to be opposed.
Right.
But I think that's what he's talking about with the coalition of the weak. I think that term weak is something I would like to maybe finesse differently.
How do you feel about that, Andrea?
Well, I guess I'm unsure. Is that like in reference to entities coming together to survive?
Mutually support.
To mutually support, so that I mean, I think that's inherent to the human condition.
Babies are weak.
Tribal.
That's a stage.
Family. Yeah. I mean, we really we don't survive alone. And if we do, we don't do it very well.
Right. Or we're something akin to a sociopath or a psychopath.
Yeah, but they are among us.
Right.
They're also a part of the story.
Well,
right. So
I have
our whole
monks.
Our
what
whole
about
society
like dudes that specifically go off and live alone?
Like a
introverts,
hermit, but there's some portion of their living that is still dependent upon others, generally speaking. If not, I mean, sure, like if you've really got like the feral child or something like that, there's survival, but what kind of survival is that? And that's why I said surviving
versus thriving. Right. As an extrovert, I often assume that anybody that wants to just go off in the woods and live by themselves and garden and have cats is doing that because of traumas that they can't get over.
Well, okay, but like, even that person
really do want to know.
Is benefiting from like they built a dwelling. Mm-hmm. How did they know how to do that?
But they prefer to be away from society.
That's different from like, because they are still depending on others. They have the knowledge and the experience of other humans. We're not solid. We're not singular.
Right.
Beings. We are connected in some form or another, and then to be completely
we would have to work really
disconnected,
hard.
like a Jungle Book style, like I mean, like I don't know what that would really look like.
Right.
I guess I don't really know. Maybe it is just a different.
Well, there have been
survival.
like one or two of those kids that we know about, like the kid that lived in the sewers for a long time, and then there was a jungle boy.
Wasn't there? There
was actually a guy raised by wolves.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard about a girl.
I thought there was a girl and she was like, I don't know, maybe 14 by the time she was found, that had been like just living in like a woods situation of some kind. I don't know. I might have just pulled that like from imaginary.
I've only ever heard like 2 or 3 stories that seemed really credible, like it actually happened. But maybe there is a. A girl. Tammy says true reality is all in our heads. What do you think that there is any actual objective reality, or is it all just all of our mass perceptions together?
I liked Robert Anton Wilson's definition of reality, which is reality is what you can get away with. And that in terms of neurodivergence, like reality is a shared hallucination.
Right.
We all agree that this is the way things work, and that's why they work.
Like
that
Norm was
way.
saying earlier,
Right.
like there isn't any way to prove what blue is.
Right.
He was
Right.
saying this in the comments when we were talking about synesthesia.
Like you might see it like this, but we will both be taught to call it blue.
Exactly.
So,
Right.
And then there are these rare cases of colorblind people who have to work really hard to be taught that that's blue and that's green, you know?
So if you explore that idea out to
That
the
there is
very
no true blue.
edges of that idea,
Yeah.
there is no way for me to prove to myself that I exist at all.
Right?
So I think therefore I am, not necessarily.
Well, you am for yourself.
And that's kind of the like idea of, well, but what is that? What is
amming?
and what is amming? And so then that's where, I think we get into those like really, it's like you just make something up, like we're one entity and then we contract and explode. And but like we were talking about before, the Eastern kind of philosophies.
God playing hide and seek with himself.
I mean, yeah, or
herself. Come on.
But then even then,
or their self.
That's right.
and I remember doing this as like a little kid, thinking about this and being like, yeah, but even then, what's outside of that then? Because in order to define this entity, there has to be edges, a framework,
words.
And so then what's outside of that?
Right.
And yeah, it's like, I guess it's the circle versus the line, where it's like, if it's a circle, there is no outside of it, right? Like is the idea of the circle, the circular, so the Eastern versus Western thought, where like there has to be an edge and an outside of, and an edge and an outside of. But if it's eternity and it's eternally doing that, there's no actual outside of. There's no way to describe it.
Have you ever seen those images of like of super chilling something? So you have a glass of water that's just near freezing, and then you take another thing that's way below freezing and you touch it, and the whole glass will turn to ice suddenly. Have you ever seen that?
Well, I think you
can see the videos.
I have
There's videos where that
visual,
happens,
sure.
where people show that. So suddenly it's a liquid state, and then something touches it, and it becomes a solid state. And I think that works for me in terms of reality. I think what I'm perceiving is highly mutable. But when my perception interacts with it, it solidifies into expectations. And then that's why societal control is so important. Societal expectations are so important, is that there is a lock on reality.
Right. That we're sharing.
We share that lock, and then there's
yeah.
divergence within there, and we can only put up with that so long before reality breaks.
Right.
And that's what I think is really interesting about this conversation, is if neurodivergence is really us evolving, and just like other things that have evolved, some don't make it. Some are superfluous evolutions. There's like nature will start selecting the stuff that will perpetuate. But I think right now there's a lot of weirdos being created. And some of them are going to be better adapted for the future than the neurotypical.
Right. The people that are truly successful at being whatever normal is.
And those people are going to weather the abuses of not conforming to the neurotypicality.
Okay, now it could be though too. I mean, this is in my mind just as
I'm just riffing.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, within that, this is within
Schrodinger's
that.
cat.
This is within that. But like, so you've got your neurotypical, and then you've got your divergence or whatever. And then like, so what if like only one of those is sufficient? And so then you like the weirdos, like some of them are going to stay weirdos.
Right.
Yeah.
And some of them are going to become the new reality.
Exactly.
The new typical.
Yes. Yeah.
God, it would just be so nice to be able to step outside of the evolution of things and just decide what we're going to do, rather than I've been talking a lot with people about the effects of the feminist movement that it's having, and bear with me for a second, it's having crushing consequences on men's mental health. And now if we expand beyond the most recent 30-ish years, you can look at the fact that non-feminism and misogynistic and patriarchal societies had crushing effects on women's mental health. Mm-hmm. And now the pendulum is swinging the opposite direction, where men need to be assertive and protective and provide. And those desires are still hardwired into a lot of female brains, that you want a guy who's calm and available and provides, but you still also want a guy that's not like your dad, not like the typical male. You know, he needs to be manly and assertive, but also ask you every time and not be pushy.
I think it just really goes back to I want to be heard. I want to be heard. You want to be heard.
Yeah.
I think it goes into communication, because there are divergence from the gender norms also. Yeah. And that I think it goes even deeper than we are fully realizing and recognizing.
It's not just about how you bang.
That I identify as female.
Yeah.
But there are all of these quote male traits that I've had my whole life. And so it's well, is there really... Are there traits that are gendered?
Who decided that?
Gendered, yeah. And how much of that? It's because when I interact with my male friends, there's a spectrum.
Your male friends in typically white culture in the U.S.
Or those who are not. Also, there's a spectrum of what their needs are, what they're comfortable with. And then especially when you get into the realm of folks who are comfortable acting outside of their own cultural norms and rules.
Yes. The things that they're used to.
Then the spectrum gets even bigger.
Right.
So
I just think it would be nice if there was a way to empower our neighbors to step outside of being within the process of evolution and observe our ability to evolve and make choices about where we're evolving to.
Yeah.
Rather than this sort of reactionary pendulum swing.
Well, and I think that when it comes into the feminist movement, it's about rules, right? I shouldn't be told that I have to do this because I'm female.
Yes.
It should not be assumed that I cannot do this because I'm female. And the same for male, but you could just say people, right? Some people want to be the provider and that's comfortable to them. And some people are looking for a provider.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
Yeah. I love the idea of moving beyond. I think we're sort of we're shivering off the snakeskin right now culturally in this gender norms movement, which the LGBTQ plus community and the feminist movement are all sort of part of this shivering off gender norms.
Right.
And I feel like we're sort of undulating more and more and more as we get closer to shedding the skin of needing people to be a particular way in order for me to understand you. I need you to wear certain things in order for me to feel safe. I need you to modulate your voice a certain way in order for me to feel safe. That will eventually, gloriously, wouldn't it be nice if we opened up into a society where we could just let people be whoever they feel like being.
Right. I don't have to give you rules or definitions.
Societies aren't wired that way.
Right. Right. I mean, and that's something I've thought about a lot, actually, Ainsley, because the feminist movement for me has always been about that I have the choice. That there's no rules.
You ought to have the choice.
There's no laws telling me that I can't because I'm a woman. And Because for me, I actually really like those like feminine typical positions. I like to make an interior space beautiful. I like to garden. I like to be with small children.
Right.
I like to care for the elderly. I like to cook. I like to sew and craft. You know, and these are all typical female
nurturer roles rather than typical
roles.
provider
And
roles.
like I really truly enjoy those things, but I do not ever want to be told that I have to do those things.
Right, that you're limited to those things.
Right. Yes.
So we were talking about this the other day about the difference between equity and equality, and I think this is what gets that distinction gets lost in that discussion, which is the desire for equity sometimes gets confused with a desire for equality, like everything is equal, when evolutionary forces did not create them equally.
Right.
But there can be equity. But equality is like guys are going to generally be taller than women, generally speaking.
Right.
So you can't be equal in height.
Right.
But you can be equitable in the ability to do things.
That reminds me of the argument that all pain is equal. If you've ever heard that, right? And it just always drove. It's like chickens. Something that drives me crazy. I'm like, come on, you know that if you stub your toe, it's not the same as if you break all your ribs. Like, you know that.
Right.
But I think the idea there is like, it's the value that we put on it. So like because it's usually talked about in emotional realms, right? So like, I feel pain, I feel trauma. Like, am I? Do they have the same value in that you are feeling hurt?
The worst thing that you've experienced is the worst thing you've experienced.
Right.
And it's going to be different than the worst thing someone else has experienced.
It's not all equal,
but also
it can be treated as valid.
Equally valid.
Equally valid.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Norm Goodwin's trying to keep up with us, and he's got some comments. He says the conversation has moved on. Do you want to?
Oh yeah. So Norm said, "I've been pondering nothing for a few years now. Like, what came before the universe? It doesn't matter if it were a different universe or infinite universes. The gap between those universes is as inconsequential as the moments when we are under anesthesia. The last thing that existed before the Big Bang could have been 10 years before or zillions of years before. Both are felt instantaneously."
Right. Like, how long is my body when I decompose? I love thinking about this, right? Because it's like, what if nothing happens when I die? Well, I know, at least in this reality that we're working in the framework of, that my body will eventually decompose and be dirt, and then like rocks, and like all of these processes are going to happen. Yeah. And then I'm like, all of these things on this earth here, if I'm here contained in planet Earth, or maybe I'm dusting off into space if there's no atmosphere containing me. Or maybe I'm taking a ride on the back of something else that's leaving the atmosphere. Anyway, all of those things,
Tesla that Elon Musk launched.
Yeah.
The dick shaped.
I'm going to just be like chilling on there, or parts of me or whatever. You know, it's thinking about energy and how it moves and changes over time. All things change over time.
But it is neither created nor destroyed.
And reform. But it's like, how many times have I done that?
The pieces that are
making up me.
So do you make a differentiation? Do you not make a differentiation then between your physical meat puppet and your psyche?
Well,
because I bet those bits have been around before in different forms.
I think that,
but has Andrea been around?
I think that these bits coming together in this particular way have made the consciousness that is Andrea.
What?
And that when these bits and decompose, and they are not going to stay together necessarily, right? And be like, so there might be another consciousness eventually created that is like this one or similar enough to it, but it's going to be different parts making it and of the thing, and so it's not. And then you're getting into like the omniverse.
I'd never thought about the coming together of your physical being having any influence on your psyche. The way that I grew up spiritually is that there's your body and there's your spirit, and your spirit is you, and it is not anybody else, and it has never existed before and is unique.
Right.
And your spirit will live on eternally, either in heaven or in hell.
Right.
Your body is only here with you in this time.
It's a vessel.
It's a vessel.
Right.
And it is your body. And it's not anybody else's body, and never has been and never will be. But it is not attached to your soul only in so much as that you're writing it on your way to heaven or hell forever.
A clear distinction between the two.
Yeah, not that the coming together of the sperm and the egg and the genes and the chemicals and the pheromones created, and then a consciousness was formed from those physical elements. I mean, I've even thought about things like reincarnation, like a particular soul coming into another body.
Right, and I think that
or the one
gets thought
where
of
we're
a
all
lot,
one and we just, like a fairy ring, we just pop up different mushrooms, but we're all technically one mushroom.
Right.
But I'd never thought about the physical body being the thing that engenders the expression of self.
And then, because I mean, oh man, there's so much there. It's yeah, I think we might have to have another episode.
Oh my God, I know. We got to make dinner. The dogs want dinner.
We're coming up on 2-hour episodes.
There's so many great comments we haven't even gotten to, guys.
Can we try to get to a few of them and then we'll wrap it up?
In 12 minutes. Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Let's go back up. So Norm says, let me ask Andrea, if the universe is infinite, then every combo of atoms that makes Andrea are formed again. Wouldn't it follow that Andrea will exist in an infinite number of times?
Right. So
so, then Andrea will always be, as the moments between those lifetimes is instantly felt. So theoretically, if all of your atoms came back together, your consciousness would come back again.
So this is where I was kind of touching on the idea of the omniverse, which is like that. Also, in it being infinite, there's also infinite incarnations of that, and then also it's all happening at once, right now, and so time is completely inconsequential. You can completely throw that concept out the window. There's no like the space between. I mean, there can be if I so choose to participate in this fractaled version of reality. On that idea, I'm just going on that one thread, but I forgot what the exact question was.
Theoretically, if all your atoms came back, wouldn't then Andrea's consciousness come back?
Well, they would have to come back in the exact same way, with the exact same connections, with the exact same presidents,
and every other atom would also be doing exact what it was like in every other, which sure. I don't think that this is the one and only time this has happened.
I just always default to parallel universes automatically, all happening simultaneously.
Yeah.
There's a billion different versions of me simultaneously.
My favorite interpretation.
And then maybe my consciousness, like, who knows what happens when you go to sleep? Maybe I was in one universe when I went to sleep, and I woke up in another universe that's slightly mutated, and it has to do with the way that I was thinking about myself.
And I think that I was always here. Because of course, why wouldn't I be? That's part of this reality.
Right.
I love it.
Like we live in such a weird, like, reductive
and we just
reality.
Assume we know what's going on.
Right?
We live in a very reductive sense of reality, societally speaking. And then dreams are always like, fuck you. That's what it always says to me. Like, but dreams, like, what the fuck?
What is that?
What just
Where did I get that idea?
That whole thing
that just came out of my brain.
I thought that was DMT.
Experience that occurred. Right. It's
Are
DMT.
dreams DMT?
Yeah. Dreams.
I thought DMT was just the moment when you die and you see your life flash before your eyes.
DMT is released in the dream state and the death state.
And birth, is it? No.
I think birth as well. Birth as well.
Which is why some people feel as though you could theoretically remember the moment of your birth if you went into a deep enough meditative state.
Psychedelic experience, being born and dying.
Yeah.
Right? So there's also nothing that says definitively that I didn't just pop in, like that the atoms that are me, Andrea, consciousness right now didn't just happen and form this
just
way
now.
Right now with this
bank.
Now. Yeah, with this bank of memories telling me that I was actually born from a mother. Like,
and so now we're getting into the Matrix.
Well, with the fractal, like the Fibonacci thing, so like past and present just morph out instantaneously. So. Yeah. That's why
Hi, welcome.
Yeah. Welcome to Post-Orthodoxy. Hillbilly wants to know, does a balloon float in space?
Float.
Does a balloon float in space? Well, what?
It wouldn't be
what space?
Floating.
What space?
I guess
beyond the gravity well?
I would assume he means like somewhere out there between the Earth and the Moon.
Okay.
Is it floating?
So outside the gravity well.
Is it full of helium? Because on Earth, balloons only float if they're full of helium.
I mean, what is floating?
What? Yeah.
Oh, God.
What is?
To rest, to float is to rest or remain on the surface of a liquid or to be buoyant. A hollow ball floated.
Or a helium balloon floats on the surface of oxygen because helium is lighter than oxygen. The currents of oxygen.
Right,
to rest or move in a liquid or the air, etc.
So if space
a balloon
is a
floating
vacuum,
on high to move lightly and gracefully. She floated down the stairs. So it requires, I don't think it's floating if it's not in air or...
I mean, it's not falling, though, either. It's propelling or moving.
It's just being, man.
It's just being, man.
Just being in space.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it depends. Is it moving? And if it is, then I have to relate that to the force.
Everything's moving.
That propelled
right?
it.
Everything moving?
So, a short answer. Due to the lack of external air pressure, because space is a vacuum, the air inside the balloon would continue to expand and almost instantaneously the balloon would pop by itself.
It doesn't hang out long enough to be in
That's
space.
Also what would happen to your body.
Yeah.
In space.
Oh, yeah, gross.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a hot dog in a microwave.
Hillbilly also said, I think the Big Bang was a white hole. What's the difference between a white hole and a black hole?
Oh, I don't know. I have not heard of a white hole.
Me neither.
And black holes are complex enough that on their own.
Right.
A white hole, according to Wikipedia, in general relativity, the white hole is a hypothetical region of space-time and singularity that cannot be entered from the outside.
Okay. It's the dual, it's the yin to the yang, or the yang.
Although energy, matter, light, and information can escape from it, in this sense, it is the reverse of a black hole, which can be entered only from the outside.
Do you have that
from
up
which
for people?
nothing can escape.
Yay. Oh, that's so nice.
So we've got an image on the screen here.
The sheep.
Go with.
Through the fence.
It's that thing again.
Wait, you found a thing?
The sheep
the thing
through
that
the
we've been talking about, like neurodivergent is like we're all crammed into a reality society and then it goes back out. That's what this image is right here too.
A black
it's the
hole.
Theme of the show.
Everything gets sucked into a black hole.
Actually, black holes don't suck.
Everything falls.
They it's
everything
like an eternal on the precipice.
So.
Yeah, I know.
I felt that on acid before.
It's really complex. It's a weird concept. Okay, anyway.
But then a white hole, the event horizon of a white hole is that nothing goes in or nothing in.
Nothing can go in, but things can get out. Black hole, things go in, but cannot get out.
Oh, maybe I was thinking of a white hole then. I don't know.
Or they perpetually seem to be falling in, but they're actually just perpetually falling.
I feel like this has because they supposedly black holes have like this insane gravitational force, right? And that's why we recognize them.
Pulls everything in.
That they have this like, but I do remember very distinctly from my astronomy courses that like my favorite line in the book that we were reading was "Black holes don't suck." And I thought it was really cool, but now I don't remember why that is. So I'm going to have to reread that.
Every show, there's always way more things than we can possibly even get into. My favorite one-liner, I haven't even read the book, but it's that zebras don't get ulcers. And just the title of the book is enough to remind me we're participating in a game that zebras do not participate in. And that's why we have ulcers and zebras don't get them. They're either being chased by a lion or not being chased by a lion. They're not being chased by a lion, but thinking about being chased by a lion.
They're not concerned with...
Which is what we do.
They'll be at the same watering hole.
Yeah.
And they don't get an ulcer.
It's either chasing me or not chasing me.
It's going to get one of us. Maybe it's going to be me, maybe somebody else. I don't know. I'm just going to try to run if you
That's the ultimate be in the moment.
Yeah.
But what we do with our frontal lobes is we think about trying to avoid being chased by a lion,
Right.
even when it's
We
not
project
there.
into
no
the
lion.
future
Yeah.
and the past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's leave it on that note.
Yeah, how do we wrap it up?
Anybody else have any questions? Did we get through everything? Norm Goodwin.
Keep your eye out for
Big
yourselves.
bangs blow, black holes suck. So yeah, we already covered that one. Theory says that the information that goes into the black hole are expelled in another dimension as a big bang.
Oh. So universes are constantly being created by the trash from our universe. That's kind of funny.
Composting, universal composting.
Is it trash? Is it compost? We can throw our most valuable things that way.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Just make
One man's
sacrifices
trash
to the
is another man's treasure.
another man's universe.
This I like to think of the show as cultural composting. All the bullshit, and then maybe if it piles up high enough, it gets hot enough, and then it transforms into something fertilizing.
Andrea, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks.
For joining us today. This was really fun.
Thank you, audience, for participating and being part of the show.
If we didn't need to go eat shrimp stir fry so badly, we would talk with you guys until our tongues fell out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. And
I
thanks.
can't wait to read
all the comments.
All the comments,
And thank
yeah.
you to the lurkers, and thank you to our future lurkers. We appreciate your comments, and we appreciate
The
it when
website is coming soon.
Yeah, we like it when you stop us on the street and let us know that you watch, because it helps boost our confidence about
It
having
does.
conversations.
If we had to
like
go by the
this.
stats alone, we probably wouldn't be doing this. But we keep getting reminded by people that are not in the stats saying,
And
hey,
conversations
that show you
like
did.
this
Yeah.
today, where like Norm Goodwin on Facebook was like talking to Hillbilly on YouTube, and he's like, "I can't like your comments because I'm not on YouTube, but I like your comments." I was like, "Oh, this is what I want. This is the community that I want." Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for playing. We'll see you on Monday. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be back on Monday for another free-ranging episode of Dark and Ainsley trying to figure out some shit.
And our guest next Thursday is going to be Astrid Selling from Sweden.
Yeah, so if you have any questions about what the hell's going on in Sweden,
Yeah. Prepare yourself.
prepare for next Thursday.
Thanks, Andrea.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.